Good evening, you're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Joanna Ho. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. A ban on plastics in eateries may take effect earlier than expected. The so-called king of judicial reviews wins his battle for legal aid to challenge the decision on jab exemption certificates. And British Prime Minister Liz Truss apologises for controversial tax cuts, but vows to stay in office. The government plans to stop eateries from using plastic utensils and tableware as early as the end of next year. Green groups welcomed the move, but caterers warned that customers might have to pick up the extra cost. Macy Mock reports.
The government had planned to ban restaurants from providing plastic cutlery from 2025. But it now wants to implement the environmentally friendly measure as early as the fourth quarter of next year. In the first phase, restaurants will be banned from providing polystyrene tableware and plastic cutlery, plates, straws, and stirrers to both dine-in and take-away customers. Eateries will also be barred from providing plastic cups and food containers to dine-in patrons. Further bans involving takeaways will be implemented in 2025.
It's too fast, especially when the last 3 years we are still suffering from the pandemic. Knives and forks have more readily available alternatives. So I would say if it's only about the first stage, I think it won't be too difficult for the restaurant industry to get ready.
Wong said plant-based utensils cost up to 3 times more than plastics.
And I believe that the cost will be passed on to the consumers. By the time of the launching next year, if the economic situation has not been improved, then the government might need to find some way to help, especially the SMEs.
Green groups welcomed the early implementation, but want the government to further reduce single-use tableware.
The Bureau should put forward clear plastic reduction targets so the public, including green groups, can assess the effectiveness of the new law.
The proposal will be debated by lawmakers on the Environmental Affairs panel next Monday. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
The cap on public gatherings will rise to 12 from Thursday, according to sources. They said the Executive Council approved the higher ceiling today. The cap has been set at 4 since April 21st as part of the government's anti-COVID measures. There were 4,954 new infections today. All but 388 were locally transmitted, including 1 case of the COVID subvariant XBD. The virus claimed 7 more lives. The king of judicial reviews, Kwok Chuk-kin, has won an appeal to get legal aid for a COVID jab case. He had earlier been refused assistance in his challenge to the government decision to invalidate thousands of vaccination exemption certificates. The High Court ruled today that Kwok Chuk-kin can receive legal aid to fight the government decision to nullify over 20,000 vaccination exemption certificates. Health Chief Lo Chung-mao had earlier invalidated certificates issued by 7 doctors who allegedly did not conduct proper medical examinations. But last week, High Court Judge Russell Coleman temporarily suspended Lo's order following the legal challenge by Kwok, the Cheung-chau resident dubbed the king of judicial reviews. Kwok was subsequently denied legal aid for the case, but he filed an appeal, which he won this morning. The Legal Aid Department had argued earlier that Kwok didn't have an exemption certificate issued by the 7 doctors, and so had no legal status to file a judicial review. But according to Kwok, the appeal judge said the case is of public interest, and every Hong Konger is a stakeholder. Kwok praised the judge and said justice is on the side of everyone. He noted that he was granted legal aid for an earlier challenge to the small house policy, although he was not a stakeholder. The department said the High Court's decision is final and stopped short of disclosing more information about Kwok's case due to legal concerns. The judicial review will commence in the High Court on Thursday. 8 members of the League of Social Democrats and the Labour Party have lost their appeal against conviction and sentence for violating the 4-person group gathering ban. They were each jailed for 14 days, suspended for 18 months after campaigning for unemployment benefits on Labor Day 2 years ago in Admiralty. In rejecting their appeal, High Court Judge Albert Wong said the defendants had increased the risk of transmitting COVID by continuing to protest after a police warning. He said they could have expressed their demand in other ways. Former League Chairman Raphael Wong, who was among those convicted, said the decision was unfair. Chief Executive John Lee says challenges remain in the reverse quarantine plan for travel to the mainland, but he said talks are making progress. Jen Slow reports.
Chief Executive John Lee said the plan for pre-departure quarantine before traveling to the mainland is making progress. His statement came after Tam Yu Chung, Hong Kong's sole representative on the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, said technical issues cannot be resolved in a short time. They include difficulties in hiring sufficient manpower for isolation facilities and accountability in the event of cross-border COVID transmission. Lee said his team is trying to iron out what he called some challenges.
We have to agree on the arrangement so that when a person having gone through the pre-departure quarantine arrangement, then he will be considered having fulfilled the 7+3 arrangement. These things we are working and we're ironing out some areas where we need to adjust. But the closed-loop arrangement, of course, is one area which we have to look at realistically as to how we can satisfy.
Lee added that he hopes travelers can be transported to the mainland in a closed-loop system so as to avoid imposing any risk to their COVID situation. But further discussions are needed with mainland officials. Lee gave no hints when the 0+0 arrangement will be implemented, stressing that further easing will depend on the pandemic situation. Janice Low, HKIBC.
Overseas, British Prime Minister Liz Truss has apologised for her economic plans which led to the pound sinking to record lows, but insists that she will not step down.
Now, I recognise we have made mistakes. I'm sorry for those mistakes, but I've fixed the mistakes. I've appointed a new Chancellor. We have restored economic stability and fiscal discipline. And what I now want to do is go on and deliver for the public.
What the Prime Minister's new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, did was to dismantle her tax cut plans that rattled financial markets. Despite what amounted to a public humiliation, Truss insisted that she will lead the Conservative Party into the next general election. But many, including her party colleagues, harbour doubts.
Well, William Hague, former Conservative leader, never Prime Minister, but leading commentator now, describes Liz Truss as Prime Minister as hanging by a thread. I think the trouble is the thread's getting weaker, not stronger, as the hours pass. And her MPs will have to absolute nerves of steel because they're facing electoral oblivion if they don't change her or something else turns up.
Israel has expressed disappointment after Australia did a U-turn and decided not to recognize West Jerusalem as the Israeli capital.
Today, the government has reaffirmed Australia's previous and long-standing position that Jerusalem is a final status issue. and a final status issue that should be resolved as part of any peace negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian peoples. The Australian government remains committed to a two-state solution in which Israel and a future Palestinian state can coexist in peace and security within internationally recognised borders. We will not support an approach that undermines this prospect.
In 2018, the Australian government took its cue from then US President Donald Trump, who shifted the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Wong said former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison was out of step internationally when he recognized West Jerusalem as the Israeli capital in an attempt to win a by-election in a Sydney district with a large Jewish population. A Russian warplane has crashed into a residential block in southern Russia, killing at least 13 people, including 3 children. The plane was on a training flight when it slammed into the building, setting it ablaze. Emergency workers rushed to the site in Yeysk, close to Ukraine, and rescued 68 people. Another 19 residents in the port city were injured. The 2 pilots ejected safely after a fire broke out in one of the engines. The Hong Kong stock market remained in positive territory for the 3rd session in a row. Investors were encouraged by fresh optimism after China's economy and the British government ditching its controversial tax cut plan. Chloe Feng reports.
China unexpectedly delayed the release of its 3rd quarter GDP data without giving a reason or setting a new date. But that didn't cause jitters among Hong Kong investors. Instead, local stocks made healthy gains for the 3rd session in a row, with the Hang Seng Index rising 1.8%. The market was boosted by the British government's tax cut U-turn, as well as China signaling renewed optimism. According to the National Development and Reform Commission, the mainland's economic growth rebounded significantly in the 3rd quarter, remaining outstanding compared with the rest of the world. Tech heavyweights Alibaba, JD.com, and Tencent each climbed between 3 and 4%, pushing the tech benchmark to 4.6%. Auto shares went into top gear, with Brilliance China leading the rally, soaring 16% as several investment banks upgraded the carmaker's ratings. This was in sharp contrast with a 60% slump when it resumed trading 2 weeks ago. BYD company advanced over 6% on expectations that its 3rd quarter profit could rise 3-fold in the wake of record sales. There was a mixed performance among sports stocks following their quarterly results. Enta dropped 3.6%, but XTAP and 361 Degrees headed north. Chloe Feng, HKIBC.
Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index closed up 301 points. To the top 10 active stocks, Tencent was up $7.20, Meituan up $4.30, Alibaba up $2.80, Wuxi Biologics up 25 cents. To the forex trading against the Hong Kong dollar, euros at 7.72, pounds at 8.88, and Australian dollar at 4.96. Over to the UK market, FTSE 100 is up 92 points. On to the weather now. It will be cloudy with occasional showers. Temperatures will range between 18 and 24 degrees. The sun will make towards the weekend. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Tuesday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Joanna Ho. Good evening.